The rain turned the dirt road into a river of mud, and Wyatt Voss cursed as his boots sank another inch with each step toward his farmhouse. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the fields of wheat he'd spent the last 3 months nursing toward harvest, and he wondered if this storm would flatten everything he'd worked for since settling in this God-forsaken corner of the frontier. He was halfway to the porch when the next flash of lightning revealed something that made his heart stop. A figure collapsed on his wooden steps, dark liquid pooling beneath a body too large to be human. Wyatt's hand went to the knife at his belt, muscles tensing as years of military training kicked in despite the 5 years since he'd left that life behind. Another crack of thunder shook the air, and in its wake he heard something that made him freeze, a sound somewhere between a whimper and a growl, weak and desperate. He approached slowly, rain streaming down his face, blurring his vision until he stood close enough to see clearly. An orc woman lay crumpled on his porch, her green skin slick with rain and blood. Deep gashes marked her arms and back, and her leather armor hung in tatters, revealing wounds that still bled freely. Her black hair was matted with mud and crimson, and as Wyatt took another step, her eyes snapped open, yellow irises filled with terror and pain. "Don't let them find me here," she whispered, her voice raw and breaking. Her hand reached out toward him, trembling, before falling back to the wooden planks with a hollow thud. "Please." "They cannot." Her words dissolved into a cough that brought up blood, and Wyatt made his decision. He sheathed his knife and knelt beside her, ignoring the voice in his head that sounded like his old commander, warning him that orcs were enemies, that they couldn't be trusted, that helping her would bring nothing but trouble. The woman's breathing was shallow, her skin pale beneath the green, and he'd seen enough battlefield injuries to know she was dying. "I'm going to move you inside," he said, keeping his voice steady and calm the way he would with a wounded animal. "This is going to hurt." She didn't respond, her eyes rolling back as consciousness slipped away. Wyatt slid his arms beneath her, grunting at her weight. She was solid muscle, easily matching his own considerable size. He carried her through the door, kicking it shut behind him against the storm, and laid her on the wooden table he used for meals and work alike. The fireplace held embers from morning, and he quickly built them back to a blaze, needing light and heat. As flames grew, he could see the extent of her injuries more clearly. Sword wounds he recognized immediately, multiple attackers from the different angles. She'd been running for her life. Wyatt stripped away the remains of her armor, working with the efficient detachment he'd learned during the war. He'd been a field medic before he'd been a soldier, before he'd seen too much death, and decided to find peace in a quiet corner of the world. His hands remembered the work even as his mind catalogued, each wound a deep gash across her ribs, another along her shoulder, defensive wounds on her forearms where she'd tried to protect herself. He worked through the night as the storm raged outside, cleaning wounds with whiskey that made her cry out even in unconsciousness, stitching torn flesh with thread he normally used to repair his clothes. Her blood was red like his own, he noticed. Somehow that seemed important, though he couldn't say why. Dawn broke gray and miserable, rain still falling in sheets, and Wyatt finally stepped back from the table. He'd done everything he could. The wounds were cleaned, stitched, and bandaged with strips torn from his spare shirt. Whether she lived or died was up to her now, and whatever gods orcs prayed to. His own exhaustion hit him like a physical weight, but he couldn't leave her on the table. Wyatt carried her to his bed, the only bed in the small farmhouse, and laid her down as gently as he could manage. She was so still she might already be dead, but when he pressed his fingers to her neck he felt a pulse, weak but steady. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat, intending to rest for just a moment. Sleep took him before he could form another thought. Wyatt woke to the sound of labored breathing and the prickling sensation of being watched. His eyes opened to find the orc woman staring at him with those yellow eyes, alert now, despite the pain that tightened the corners of her mouth. She was flat on her back still, but one hand had moved to the bandages on her ribs, fingers exploring the stitches beneath. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough from sleep. Sunlight streamed through the window afternoon sun, which meant he'd slept for hours. "Don't move too much. You'll tear the stitches." She watched him with an expression he couldn't read, wariness and confusion warring across features that were both familiar and alien. Her tusks were small, barely protruding past her lower lip, and there was an elegance to the sharp angles of her face that surprised him. "Why?" she asked finally, the single word heavy with a dozen unspoken questions. Wyatt stood, his back protesting after hours in the chair, and moved to the fireplace to stoke the flames back to life. "You asked me not to let them find you. I didn't." He set a pot of water to boil, moving through the familiar routine of making tea. "Who were they?" She was silent long enough that he thought she wouldn't answer. When he turned back with 2 cups of weak tea, all he could afford, she was staring at the ceiling, her jaw tight. "Hunters," she said finally. "Human hunters who take bounties on orc heads. They attacked my patrol 3 days ago, killed the others. I ran." The shame in her voice was unmistakable, and she closed her eyes. "I am Griska, warrior of the Stone Fang clan. And I ran like a coward while my brothers and sisters died." Wyatt set 1 cup on the small table beside the bed, then settled back into his chair with his own. "Running from overwhelming odds isn't cowardice. It's survival. Staying would have just added your body to their count." "You know nothing of orc honor," Griska said, but there was no heat in the words. She tried to sit up, gasped at the pain, and fell back with a curse in a language Wyatt didn't recognize. "I know enough about staying alive," he replied. "I was a soldier once. Fought in the border wars 10 years back before the treaty. Saw plenty of orcs and plenty of humans die for honor and glory, and a dozen other words that don't mean much when you're bleeding out in the mud." He sipped his tea, watching her over the rim. "I'm Wyatt Voss. And you're safe here for now." "For now," she echoed, catching the implication. "You will turn me in when it is convenient. I'll do no such thing." The words came out sharper than he intended, and he softened his tone. "But hunters tracking an orc don't give up easy, especially if they're close to their prey. If they followed your trail here, we'll have a problem." Griska's hand moved to her side again, feeling for a weapon that wasn't there. "Where is my blade?" broken from the look of it. "I found the hilt tangled in your armor." Wyatt stood and retrieved it from the mantel, the snapped steel catching the light. This was good craftsmanship once. She took it from him, fingers closing around the familiar leather grip, and something in her expression crumbled. "My father made this blade, gave it to me when I completed my warrior trials." Her thumb traced the broken edge. "Now it is as broken as I am." "Steel can be reforged," Wyatt said quietly. "And you're not broken. Injured, yes, but you're alive, and that counts for something." The days that followed fell into a careful rhythm. Griska's wounds kept her bedridden, though she chafed at the helplessness with a frustration Wyatt understood too well. He brought her food, simple fare of bread and stew, and the occasional egg from his chickens, and changed her bandages twice daily, checking for signs of infection that thankfully never came. She watched him constantly with those unsettling yellow eyes, as if trying to solve a puzzle. On the 3rd day, as he cleaned the wound on her shoulder, she finally asked the question he'd been expecting. "Why do you help me? You were a soldier. You fought my people. I saw the scars on your chest when you changed your shirt." Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "You should hate orcs." Wyatt's hands paused in their work and he thought about how to answer. "I saw a lot of orcs die during the war, killed my share too." He met her eyes, refusing to look away from what he'd been. "But I also saw a lot of humans die. Good people and bad, brave and cowardly, all mixed together until it stopped mattering what color their skin was. After a while, all I saw was waste." He tied off the fresh bandage and stepped back. "When I found you on my porch, I didn't see an orc. I saw someone who needed help." Everything else seemed less important than that. Griska absorbed this in silence, her expression unreadable. "You are a strange human, Wyatt Voss, so I've been told." He gathered the soiled bandages to burn in the fire. "Rest. You're healing well, but it'll be another week at least before you can travel safely. And then you will send me away." It wasn't a question. "And then you'll be well enough to make your own choices about where you go," he corrected. "There's a difference." Rain returned that night, a softer version of the storm that had brought Griska to his door. Wyatt lay on the floor near the fire, wrapped in his spare blanket, and tried not to think about how his bed was occupied by an orc warrior who could probably snap his neck with one hand if she decided he was a threat. Sleep was slow in coming, and when it did, his dreams were troubled by memories of the war faces of men he'd served with, faces of orcs he'd killed, all blurring together until he couldn't tell the difference. He woke to find Griska standing at the window, silhouetted against the pre-dawn gray. She swayed slightly, one hand pressed to her bandaged ribs, but she was upright under her own power for the first time. "You should be in bed," Wyatt said, sitting up carefully to avoid startling her. "I needed to see." She didn't turn from the window, her voice distant. "To know if they had found this place." Wyatt joined her, scanning the fields and tree line with practiced eyes. Nothing moved except the wind through his wheat. No signs of anyone. The rain would have washed away your trail if they were tracking you. Perhaps. But she didn't sound convinced. "Or perhaps they are simply waiting, watching. You think I led them here." The accusation stung more than he expected. Now she did turn, and the look she gave him was complicated, part apology, part resignation. "I think you are one man alone on a frontier farm. I think hunters with bounties to claim are not known for their mercy or their honor, and I think my presence here puts you in danger whether you led them or not." She moved slowly back toward the bed, her strength clearly flagging. "You should not have helped me." "Maybe not," Wyatt agreed. "But I did, and what's done is done. We'll deal with whatever comes." Over the following days, Griska grew stronger. She began moving around the small farmhouse, at first just short walks to maintain her strength, then longer periods out of bed. Wyatt showed her his property, the chicken coop, the small barn with his aging plow horse, the fields of wheat that were his entire livelihood. She studied everything with an intensity that suggested she was categorizing exits and defensive positions, and Wyatt couldn't blame her. He'd done the same when he'd first arrived, old instincts dying hard. "This is good land," she said one afternoon as they stood at the edge of his wheat field. The stalks were waist-high and green, swaying in the breeze. "Rich soil, clean water from the creek. You chose well." "It's honest work," Wyatt replied. "Quiet. After the war, I needed quiet." Griska nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "War follows soldiers home, even when the fighting ends. I have seen warriors of my clan return changed, haunted by what they saw and did." She looked at him sideways. "Do the ghosts visit you often, often enough?" He'd never said it out loud before, but somehow it felt safe to tell her. "Some nights I wake up sure I'm back in the mud and the blood, sure that the next breath will be my last. Then I remember where I am and it passes." And you live here alone with only ghosts for company. It wasn't quite a question. The living aren't always better company than the dead, Wyatt said. Present circumstances excluded. That earned him a sound that might have been a laugh, rough and unpracticed. You have a strange way with words, Wyatt Voss. They fell into an easier companionship after that. Griska was careful not to overstep, treating his home with respect, helping where she could despite her healing wounds. She had clever hands, he discovered, watching her mend a broken chair leg he'd been meaning to fix for months. She worked with the kind of focused precision he associated with craftsmen, not warriors. My mother was a woodworker, she explained when she caught him watching. Before I chose the warrior path, she tried to teach me her trade. I was impatient, eager to prove myself in battle. Now I wish I had paid more attention to her lessons. It's never too late to learn, Wyatt offered, perhaps. But her expression suggested she didn't believe it. 2 weeks after her arrival, Wyatt returned from checking his snares in the woods to find Griska in the yard, moving through a series of slow, deliberate movements that he recognized as combat forms. Her face was tight with concentration and pain, sweat darkening her shirt despite the cool autumn air. He watched from the porch as she flowed from one position to the next, her body remembering what her mind might doubt. The movements were beautiful in their controlled violence, each strike and block executed with precision despite her obvious discomfort. When she finally stopped, breathing hard and clutching her ribs, he spoke. "You're pushing too hard. Those wounds aren't fully healed." "They never will be if I coddle them," Griska shot back, but she didn't resume the forms. Instead, she lowered herself carefully to sit on the ground, legs stretched out before her. A warrior who cannot fight is not a warrior. Wyatt descended from the porch and sat beside her, close enough to talk comfortably, but far enough to respect her space. "And what happens when you are a warrior? Where will you go?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications they'd both been avoiding. Griska stared at the horizon, where the sun was beginning its descent toward evening. "I do not know," she admitted quietly. "My clan will think me dead. If I return and tell them I survived while the others fell, while I ran instead of dying with honor," she shook her head, "I would be cast out. Shamed. Better to let them believe me dead with the others. So you'll just disappear, start over somewhere new. What choice do I have?" There was anger in her voice now, but it was directed inward. "I cannot go back. I cannot stay here. I am a warrior without a clan, an orc alone in human lands where my very presence invites violence." Her hands clenched into fists. "I should have died with them. At least then I would have had honor." "Honor doesn't keep you warm at night," Wyatt said. "It doesn't put food in your belly or give your life meaning. It's just a word people use to justify suffering." He'd said similar things to soldiers under his command during the war, men ready to throw their lives away for glory. "You're alive, Griska. That's not nothing." She turned to look at him, really look at him, and he saw the vulnerability beneath her warrior's mask. "Why do you care what happens to me? I am nothing to you, a burden, a danger." "Maybe I'm tired of being alone," Wyatt said, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. "Maybe I'm tired of waking up to silence and spending my days with no one to talk to except chickens and a horse too old to care." Maybe he stopped, unsure how to finish. "Maybe what?" Griska's voice was soft, her yellow eyes searching his face. "Maybe I see something in you worth preserving," he finished. "Someone who's been where I've been, who understands what it means to survive when you're not sure you should have." They sat in silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Wyatt became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth radiating from Griska's body, of the way her scent, something earthy and wild beneath the soap he'd given her, seemed to fill his senses. He stood abruptly, needing distance before he did something foolish. "I'll start dinner." "You should wash up." If Griska noticed his sudden departure, she didn't comment on it. But when he glanced back from the doorway, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The change between them was subtle but undeniable. They moved around each other with a new awareness, careful not to touch yet somehow always conscious of where the other was. Wyatt caught himself watching Griska as she worked, admiring the strength in her arms as she hauled water from the well, the grace in her movements as her injuries continued to heal. And sometimes he caught her watching him in return, her gaze lingering on his hands as he repaired tools or prepared food. Neither of them spoke of it, but the air between them grew charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. 3 weeks after her arrival, Wyatt was working in the barn when he heard horses approaching. He grabbed the pitchfork he'd been using, his heart racing, and moved to the barn door. 4 riders were coming up the road, armed and rough, looking exactly the kind of men who hunted orcs for bounties. Wyatt set the pitchfork aside and walked out to meet them, forcing his expression into something approximating friendly curiosity. "Help you gentlemen with something," the lead rider, a scarred man with cold eyes, studied him for a long moment. "We're tracking an orc. Wounded female about 3 weeks back. Storm would have slowed her down. You seen anything?" "Just me out here," Wyatt said, keeping his voice casual. "Haven't seen any orcs. What's the bounty?" 50 silver, the man said. "Dead or alive, though dead's easier." "She killed 2 of our friends during the hunt. We aim to make her pay for that." Wyatt whistled low. 50 silver is good money. I'll keep my eyes open." He gestured toward his fields. "I'm usually out working from dawn to dusk. If she comes through, I'll send word to town." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "You live alone out here?" "Alone and liking it that way," Wyatt confirmed. "Came here for the peace and quiet after the war. No wife, no family, just me and my crops." One of the other riders was studying the farmhouse, and Wyatt's pulse quickened. If they decided to search the place, they'd find Griska hiding in the root cellar where he'd sent her the moment he'd heard the horses. "Mind if we water our horses?" the scarred man asked. "It's been a long ride." Every instinct screamed at Wyatt to refuse, but that would raise suspicion. "Help yourself to the well. I need to get back to work. Harvest won't wait." He returned to the barn, gripping the pitchfork to keep his hands from shaking, and forced himself to continue mucking out stalls while the hunters watered their horses. Every second felt like an eternity, waiting for a shout that would mean they'd found her, waiting for violence he wasn't sure he could prevent. Finally, mercifully, he heard the sound of horses moving away. He waited until the hoofbeats faded completely before dropping the pitchfork and running to the house. The root cellar door was hidden beneath a rug in the kitchen, and he hauled it open to find Griska crouched in the darkness, his hunting knife in her hand. She looked up at him, and he saw the same fear he'd seen that first night on his porch. "They're gone," he said, offering his hand to help her up. "But they're still looking. They said you killed 2 of them." "They killed my patrol first," Griska said, emerging from the cellar with the stiffness of someone who'd been cramped in a small space. "I did what I had to do to survive." She set the knife on the table, her hand shaking slightly. "If they had found me here, they would have killed you too. You should have given me up. That was never an option." Wyatt closed the cellar door, his own adrenaline still making his heart race. "But we need to be more careful. They might come back." Griska paced the small kitchen, restless energy rolling off her in waves. "I cannot stay here. Every day I remain is another day I put you in danger." She turned to face him, her expression resolute. "I will leave tonight, go north into the mountains. They will not find me there." "You'll die in the mountains," Wyatt said flatly. "Winter's coming and you don't have supplies or proper gear." You'd freeze before you made it a week. Better that than bringing death to your door. Stop. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders before he could think better of it. Just stop. You're not leaving. We'll figure this out together. Griska stared at him, and he became suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the heat of her skin beneath his palms, of the way her breath caught. Her eyes dropped to his mouth, and for a moment he thought she might close the distance between them. Instead, she pulled back, breaking the contact. You are a fool, Wyatt Voss. Probably, he agreed, his voice rough, but I'm a fool who's not letting you go. The hunters returned twice more over the following week, each time asking the same questions, each time searching the area with increasing frustration. Each time, Griska hid in the root cellar, and each time, Wyatt's lies came easier, but the strain was taking its toll. Griska grew quieter, more withdrawn, and Wyatt caught her staring out the window for hours at a time, clearly wrestling with the decision to leave. He wanted to tell her to stay, wanted to find the words to convince her that she belonged here, but the words stuck in his throat. On the 8th day after the first visit, he returned from town with supplies to find Griska in the yard, practicing with a wooden staff she'd fashioned from a fallen branch. Her movements were sharp and controlled, no longer hindered by her wounds, and he realized with a start that she was fully healed now. There was nothing keeping her here except her own choice. She stopped when she saw him, lowering the staff. You were gone long today. Had to pick up some things. He showed her the bundles he carried: fabric, thread, leather. Winter's coming. You'll need proper clothes if you're going to stay through it. Griska's eyes widened. You assume I am staying. I'm hoping you are, Wyatt said, setting the supplies on the porch. But I know it's your choice to make. She was silent for a long moment, the staff still in her hands. Those hunters will not stop looking. Eventually they will search this house. Eventually they will find me. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Wyatt said. But I'm not asking you to leave, Griska. I'm asking you to stay. Why? The word came out almost desperate. Why do you want me here? I am a danger to you. I bring nothing but risk and trouble. Wyatt climbed the porch steps and set the supplies down carefully before turning to face her. You want honesty. I've lived alone for 5 years. 5 years of talking to myself, of eating meals in silence, of going to bed wondering if this is all there is. Then you showed up, bleeding and terrified, and I remembered what it felt like to matter to someone, to have someone matter to me. He took a breath. These past weeks with you here, even with the danger, even with the hiding, they've been the most alive I've felt since I left the war. I don't want to go back to how things were before. Griska's grip on the staff loosened, and it fell to the ground. She climbed the porch steps slowly, stopping when she was close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her yellow eyes. You are a fool, she said again, but this time there was no heat in it. A foolish, kind, stubborn human who should have better sense. Probably, Wyatt agreed. But I'm your fool if you'll have me. She reached out and traced a finger along his jaw, the touch gentle despite the calluses on her hands. I have never wanted to stay anywhere the way I want to stay here. With you. The admission seemed to cost her, vulnerability naked on her face. But I am afraid of what it means, afraid of what will happen when the world finds out. The world doesn't have to know, Wyatt said, covering her hand with his. Out here it's just us. We can make our own rules. Can we? She searched his face. You say that now, but when winter comes and we are trapped together in this small house, when the novelty of my presence fades, will you still want me here? Will you still see me as Griska, or will I become just the orc in your home? Wyatt turned his head and pressed a kiss to her palm, feeling her sharp intake of breath. I see you, Griska. Not an orc, not a warrior, not a burden, just you. And that's all I want to keep seeing. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his, her breath warm on his face. They stood like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something neither of them could name but both of them felt. "I will stay," she whispered, "for as long as you will have me." "Then you'll be here a long time," Wyatt replied and closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people learning the shape of each other. But when Griska's hands came up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer, gentleness gave way to something deeper. She tasted like the tea they'd shared that morning and something uniquely her, and Wyatt felt like he was falling and being caught at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Griska's eyes were bright with emotion. "I have never," she started, then stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. "Neither have I," Wyatt said, understanding what she meant. "Not like this." They stood together on the porch as the sun sank toward evening, holding each other. And for the first time since the war, Wyatt felt something close to peace. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Wyatt's life. He and Griska fell into a new rhythm, one built on partnership and growing affection. She helped with the harvest, her strength making short work of bundling wheat and hauling sacks to the barn. In return, he taught her to cook human food, laughing at her first attempts at bread that came out hard enough to use as weapons. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing stories of their pasts. Griska told him about growing up in the Stone Fang clan, about the harsh beauty of the mountain settlements where orcs made their homes, about the pressure to prove herself as the smallest of her siblings. Wyatt shared memories of his childhood on a farm not unlike this one, of joining the army to escape poverty, of the friends he'd lost, and the things he'd done that still haunted him. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other in other ways. Kisses stolen while working in the barn, hands held as they walked the property line at dusk. Nights spent wrapped in each other's arms as the temperature dropped and winter approached. Griska was fierce in her affection, holding nothing back once she'd decided to trust him, and Wyatt found himself falling deeper with each passing day. But the threat of the hunters was never far from their minds. Twice more they came, and twice more Griska hid while Wyatt played the role of the ignorant farmer. The scarred man was growing suspicious, Wyatt could tell, his questions sharper and his eyes lingering too long on details that might betray a second person living in the house. "They know," Griska said after the last visit, emerging from the cellar with tight shoulders. "Or they suspect. It is only a matter of time before they act on it." "Then we need to be ready," Wyatt said. He'd been thinking about this, planning for the possibility that hiding wouldn't be enough. "I've got my old service sword in the barn, and there's the crossbow I use for hunting. If they come with violence in mind, we'll defend ourselves." "Against 4 armed hunters," Griska shook her head. "You would die, Wyatt, and I cannot." Her voice broke and she turned away. "I cannot watch you die for me." Wyatt pulled her back against his chest, wrapping his arms around her. "Then we make sure it doesn't come to that. We're smart about this. We prepare, we plan, and we survive. Together." She leaned into him, and he felt the tension in her muscles slowly ease. "Together," she repeated. "I like the sound of that word." Winter announced its arrival with the first snow in early November. Wyatt woke to find the world transformed, white covering everything in sight. Beside him, Griska stirred, her warmth a comfort against the chill that had crept into the house overnight. "It is beautiful," she said, sitting up to look out the window. "We get snow in the mountains, but seeing it cover the fields like a blanket, this is different." They spent the morning preparing for the deeper cold to come, sealing gaps in the walls with mud and straw, stacking extra firewood near the hearth. The work was hard but satisfying, made easier by companionship, and the occasional playful snowball fight that left them both breathless with laughter. It was during one of these moments, with Griska laughing as she brushed snow from her hair, that Wyatt realized he loved her. The recognition hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. He loved this orc woman who'd crawled to his porch covered in blood, loved her strength and her vulnerability, loved the way she hummed tunelessly while cooking and the fierce concentration on her face when she practiced her combat forms. "What?" Griska asked, noticing his stare. "Do I have snow on my face?" "I love you," Wyatt said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "I know it's probably too soon, and I know our situation is complicated, but I love you, Griska. I need you to know that." She went very still, her yellow eyes wide. For a terrible moment, Wyatt thought he'd made a mistake, pushed too hard too fast. Then she was crossing the distance between them, pulling him down into a kiss that tasted like snow and promise. "I love you too," she said against his mouth. "I have loved you since the day you sat beside me and told me that honor was just a word, since the day you made me believe I deserved to live." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "You saved my life, Wyatt Voss, and then you gave me a reason to live it." They held each other in the snow, and Wyatt sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever force had brought her to his door. The hunters came on a night in late November, when the moon was dark and the temperature had dropped below freezing. Wyatt woke to the sound of horses and men's voices, too many to be the same four who'd been searching. He shook Griska awake, pressing a finger to her lips for silence. "They're here," he whispered, "and they brought friends." Griska was out of bed in an instant, moving to the window. Wyatt joined her, his blood running cold at what he saw. At least 8 men surrounded the house, all armed, all clearly intent on violence. The scarred leader stood at their head, a torch in one hand. "Wyatt Voss," the man called out, "we know you've been harboring the orc. Send her out and you'll live. Try to protect her and you'll burn with her." Wyatt's hand found Griska's, squeezing tight. "The cellar won't work. They'll search everywhere." "Then we fight," Griska said, her voice calm despite the situation. "You have weapons in the barn. We'd never make it." "Then we make our stand here." She turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "I am sorry I brought this to your door. I am sorry you will die because of me." "Stop," Wyatt said fiercely. "We're not dead yet, and I'd rather die defending you than live knowing I gave you up." The torch came through the window in a shower of glass, landing on the floor and immediately catching the rug on fire. Wyatt grabbed a bucket of water they kept for emergencies and doused it, but 2 more torches followed, and he knew it was only a matter of time before the whole house was ablaze. "We have to go out," he said, hating the words even as he spoke them. "We can't stay in here." Griska nodded and grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace, testing its weight. "Then we go together. Back to back, the way warriors fight." Wyatt retrieved the heavy wooden staff Griska had been training with and positioned himself by the door. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. He yanked the door open and they burst out together into the freezing night. The hunters were ready for them, closing in with weapons drawn. Wyatt swung the staff with all his strength, catching one man in the ribs and sending him sprawling. Beside him, Griska moved with lethal grace, the poker singing through the air, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. A blade sliced across Wyatt's arm, and he felt hot blood soak his shirt. Another hunter came at Griska from behind, and Wyatt threw himself at the man, tackling him to the ground. They rolled, grappling, and Wyatt felt hands closing around his throat. Then Griska was there, pulling the hunter off with such force the man flew backward. She stood over Wyatt like an avenging spirit, her green skin pale in the torchlight, blood streaming from a cut above her eye. "You want her," Wyatt gasped, climbing to his feet. "You'll have to go through me." The scarred leader laughed, a cold sound without humor. "Gladly." He rushed forward, blade gleaming, and Wyatt knew he was about to die. Time seemed to slow, and in that stretched moment he regretted nothing except that he and Griska wouldn't have more time together. Then a horn sounded from the trees, clear and bright, and everything changed. Riders poured from the forest, at least 20 of them, and Wyatt's heart sank further until he realized they were orcs. Green-skinned warriors on massive horses, weapons drawn, and at their head rode an orc even larger than Griska, his armor marked with the insignia of a clan leader. "Stone Fang," Griska breathed beside him. "My clan." The battle was brief and brutal. The hunters, caught between the house and the orc war party, had no chance. Those who could run did, disappearing into the night. Those who stood their ground were quickly overwhelmed. Within minutes, it was over, and the scarred leader lay dead in the snow. The large orc dismounted and strode toward them, his expression unreadable. Wyatt moved to stand beside Griska, ready to defend her even against her own people if necessary. "Griska," the orc said, his voice like grinding stone, "we thought you dead." "I should be dead, brother," Griska replied, and Wyatt realized this must be family. "I ran while the others fought. I abandoned my patrol." Her brother and Wyatt could see the resemblance now in the shape of their faces, shook his head. "The patrol leader lived long enough to tell us what happened. You ran on his orders to bring word of the attack. You did your duty." His eyes shifted to Wyatt, assessment clear. "And found unexpected allies, it seems." "This is Wyatt Voss," Griska said, and there was something fierce and proud in her voice. "He saved my life, gave me shelter and healing, protected me from the hunters." She took Wyatt's hand, facing her brother squarely, "and I love him." The silence that followed was deafening. Wyatt could feel the eyes of every orc warrior on them, could sense the weight of taboo and tradition pressing down. He waited for violence, for rejection, for the moment when Griska would be forced to choose between her people and him. Instead, her brother began to laugh, a deep booming sound that echoed across the snow-covered fields. "Of course you do. You never could do anything the easy way, little sister." He turned to his warriors. "Set a perimeter. Make sure none of the hunters return. And someone put out that fire before this human's house burns down." The orcs moved to obey, and Griska's brother turned back to them with an expression that was somewhere between amusement and exasperation. "I am Thrak, war leader of the Stone Fang clan and, regrettably, this one's eldest brother. You have my thanks, Wyatt Voss, for protecting my sister when we could not." "I didn't do it for thanks," Wyatt said, still processing what was happening. "I did it because she needed help." "Which makes you either very honorable or very stupid," Thrak replied. "Possibly both." He looked between them, his expression growing serious. "What happens now? Griska, you are welcome to return to the clan. Your honor is intact and your place as a warrior waits for you." Wyatt felt his heart clench, knowing what he had to do. He turned to Griska and released her hand. "You should go. Be with your people. You don't have to hide anymore." Griska stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You think I would leave you, after everything?" "I think you deserve to be somewhere you belong," Wyatt said, even though each word felt like swallowing glass. "With people who understand you, where you don't have to hide or pretend or—" She kissed him, cutting off his words with her mouth, and when she pulled back her eyes were blazing. "I belong here, you foolish man, with you. This is my home now." "You would give up your clan?" Thrak asked. "Your place among the Stone Fang. I would give up anything to stay with him," Griska said simply. "He gave me back my life. I will not leave him now." Thrak was quiet for a long moment, and Wyatt held his breath. Finally, the war leader nodded. "Then the Stone Fang clan will recognize this union such as it is. You will have our protection, both of you." He fixed Wyatt with a hard stare. Treat her poorly, and I will return to remove pieces of you until there is nothing left. Understood?" "Understood," Wyatt said, relief and joy flooding through him in equal measure. "Good." Throck clapped him on the shoulder with enough force to nearly knock him over. "Now, let us see to your injuries and repair what damage we can. In the morning, we will discuss how to ensure those hunters do not return." The night passed in a blur of activity. The orc warriors, with surprising efficiency, helped extinguish the last of the fires and began repairing the damage to Wyatt's house. They worked through the dark hours while Wyatt and Griska had their wounds tended by the clan healer, an elderly orc woman who clucked her tongue at their injuries but pronounced them both likely to survive. As dawn broke gray and cold, Throck gathered everyone around a fire built in Wyatt's yard. The surviving hunters had been tracked and either captured or driven so far into the wilderness they'd likely freeze before finding civilization. "The bounty will be rescinded," Throck announced. "I will send word to the human settlements that Griska of the Stone Fang died in the initial attack. The hunters will have no reason to return." He looked at Wyatt. "But you should know that harboring an orc, even a dead one officially, will make you suspect in human eyes. Your neighbors may turn against you." "I don't have neighbors for 5 miles in any direction," Wyatt pointed out. "And I've never much cared what people think of me anyway." "A good quality in a man taking an orc as a mate," Throck said approvingly. He stood, signaling his warriors to prepare to depart. "We will leave you now, but know that you have allies in the Stone Fang clan, Wyatt Voss. If you need us, send word." Griska embraced her brother and Wyatt saw tears on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding, for not making me choose." "You are my sister," Throck said simply. "Your happiness matters to me, strange as your choices may be." He nodded to Wyatt. "Keep her safe. Keep her happy." "I will," Wyatt promised. They watched as the orc war party mounted up and rode back into the forest, disappearing like ghosts in the morning mist. When the last of them had gone, Wyatt and Griska stood alone in the yard, surrounded by the evidence of the night's violence but alive and together. "So," Wyatt said, "that was eventful." Griska laughed, the sound bright and free. "You have a gift for understatement." She turned to survey the damage to the house. "We have much work to do." "We have time," Wyatt said, pulling her close. All the time in the world, winter deepened, and with it came the hard work of survival. The damage to the house was repaired with Griska's help, her strength and skill with wood making quick work of what would have taken Wyatt weeks alone. They reinforced the walls, built a proper workshop in the barn, and prepared for the long months of cold ahead. The isolation that had once bothered Wyatt now felt like a blessing. Here, in this remote corner of the frontier, they could be themselves without fear of judgment or violence. Griska moved through the house like she'd always belonged there, humming those tuneless songs while she worked, arguing with him about the best way to season stew, falling asleep in his arms each night with a contentment that made his chest ache. On a night in late December, with snow falling softly outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, Wyatt pulled out the small wooden box he'd been working on in secret. Inside was a ring he'd carved from a piece of oak, polished smooth and inlaid with a sliver of green stone he'd found by the creek. "Griska," he said, and his voice shook slightly. "I know we haven't known each other long. I know our relationship breaks every rule and taboo there is. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He opened the box, showing her the ring. "Will you marry me?" Griska stared at the ring, her eyes wide. "Marriage is a human custom," she said slowly. "Orcs do not. We have bonding ceremonies, but they are different." "Then we'll do both," Wyatt said. "Or neither. Or invent our own tradition. I don't care about the specifics, Griska. I just care about you, about us, about making this official in whatever way matters to you. She took the ring from the box, holding it up to the firelight. It is beautiful, she said softly. You made this. I did. The stone reminded me of your skin. He watched her face, trying to read her expression. If you don't want to, if this is too fast or too human or yes, Griska interrupted, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Yes, I will marry you, Wyatt Voss, in whatever way we choose, by whatever customs we create. She pulled him close, kissing him deeply. You are mine and I am yours. Let the whole world know it. They were married on the first day of spring, when the snow had melted and the first green shoots were pushing through the earth. Throck returned with a contingent of stone fang warriors, and to Wyatt's surprise, several of his old army friends made the journey as well, men he'd written to about his plans who'd responded with cautious support. The ceremony was a blend of human and orc traditions, conducted in the yard with the forest as witness. Griska wore a dress they'd sewn together from the fabric Wyatt had bought months ago, green as her skin with embroidery she'd painstakingly learned to add. Wyatt wore his best clothes, cleaned and mended, his hands shaking as he spoke the vows they'd written together. I vow to protect you, he said, holding her hands, to stand beside you against whatever comes, to see you, truly see you, every day for the rest of my life. I vow to choose you, Griska replied, her voice strong. Every day in every way, to build a life with you that honors both of our people, to love you with everything I am. Throck performed the orc portion of the ceremony, binding their hands with a leather cord and speaking in the orcish tongue about strength and partnership. One of Wyatt's friends, a former chaplain, spoke the human words about love and commitment. When it was done, they were married in the eyes of both their peoples, united in a way that had never been done before. The celebration lasted into the night, humans and orcs sharing food and drink, wary at first but gradually warming to each other. Wyatt watched it all with a sense of wonder, seeing barriers crumble in the face of shared joy. You have done something remarkable here, Throck said, finding him at the edge of the firelight. Built a bridge where there was only a chasm. Not many could do that. I just loved her, Wyatt said simply. Everything else followed from that. Love is never just anything, Throck replied. Especially love that crosses boundaries. He clasped Wyatt's shoulder. You have my respect, human. Use it well. Griska found him later, pulling him away from the celebration into the quiet of the house. Come to bed, husband, she said, the word making them both smile. Our guests can celebrate without us. Wyatt let her lead him to their room, to the bed they'd shared for months, but which now felt different, sanctified by vows and witnessed promises. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other anew in the context of this commitment they'd made. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Griska traced patterns on his chest. I have been thinking, she said quietly, about the future. What about it, this bridge you have built that Throck spoke of? It should not end with us. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. There are other orcs who feel isolated from their clans, other humans who live alone on the frontier. Perhaps we could, I do not know what to call it, create a place where both can come together safely. Wyatt considered this, the idea taking root. A settlement, mixed human and orc families, it would be dangerous, controversial. Everything worthwhile is, Griska pointed out, and we have already proven it can work. We'd need land, resources, people willing to take the risk. Throck would help, I think, and your friends from the army seemed open-minded. She smiled, and in the moonlight her tusks gleamed. We could build something new, something better than what either of our peoples have alone. Wyatt pulled her down for a kiss. Then let's do it, but tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to be here with you. Tomorrow, Griska agreed, settling back against his chest. We have all the time in the world. The years that followed were not easy, but they were rich with purpose and love. Word spread slowly of the human farmer and his orc wife, of the settlement they were building where the frontier met the forest. Some came seeking refuge, others seeking adventure, but all were welcomed with the same conditions: respect for both races, commitment to peaceful coexistence, willingness to work hard. The settlement grew from Wyatt's farm to a small village, houses built in styles that blended human and orc architecture. Fields were planted and tended by mixed crews who learned each other's techniques and found that cooperation yielded better harvests than either could manage alone. Children of both races played together, growing up without the prejudices their parents had fought to overcome. There were setbacks, of course. Raids from humans who saw the settlement as an abomination, attacks from orc clans who viewed it as betrayal. But each time, the settlement endured, protected by warriors of both races who had chosen this new path. Wyatt and Griska became the unofficial leaders, mediating disputes and setting the example for how different peoples could build a life together. Their home remained the original farmhouse, expanded now to accommodate the family. They'd built 3 children who bore features of both their parents, green-skinned with gentle tusks, strong and quick and loved beyond measure. On a spring evening 10 years after that first desperate night when Griska had crawled to his porch, Wyatt stood in the doorway of their home and watched the settlement bustling with life. Smoke rose from chimneys, voices called in multiple languages, children laughed as they chased each other through the streets. Griska joined him, slipping her hand into his with the ease of long practice. Silver touched her black hair now, and there were lines around her eyes from years of smiling. She was more beautiful to him than she'd been that first night, polished by time and love into something precious beyond measure. "Thinking deep thoughts?" she asked. "Just remembering," Wyatt said. "That night you showed up more dead than alive, asking me not to let them find you." "My luckiest moment," Griska said. "Finding your porch in the storm, finding you." "I think we were both lucky," Wyatt replied. He turned to face her, cupping her cheek in his palm. "I love you, Griska Voss, more today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today." She leaned into his touch, her yellow eyes warm with affection. "And I love you, my stubborn human. Thank you for seeing me that night, for seeing past the blood and the fear to who I could be. Thank you for trusting me enough to stay." They kissed as the sun set, 2 people from different worlds who had built a bridge between them and then invited others to cross. Behind them, the settlement lived and breathed, proof that love could overcome even the deepest divides. And in the growing darkness, as stars began to appear overhead, Wyatt sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had brought Griska to his door on that storm-racked night so long ago. She had crawled to his porch covered in blood, begging him not to let them find her there, and in saving her he had saved himself. They had built a life together, a family, a community. They had taken their broken pieces and forged something whole and beautiful. And they would continue building, continue growing, continue loving, for all the years they had left. Together, they walked back into their home, closing the door on the night and opening it to the warmth and light within. Outside, the settlement settled into evening routines, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would come and they would face it together, human and orc united in purpose and hope. The story that had begun with blood and fear had transformed into one of love and possibility. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered: 2 people choosing each other, again and again, and in doing so, changing their world. Years later, when their children asked about how they met, Wyatt and Griska would tell the story together. each filling in details the other forgot. They spoke of storms and blood, of fear and hope, of the moment when a desperate orc woman crawled to a lonely farmer's porch and whispered words that would change both their lives forever. "Don't let them find me here," Griska had begged, and Wyatt had made a choice that defined the rest of his days. He had chosen compassion over fear, love over prejudice, connection over isolation. And in doing so, he had found everything he'd been missing without knowing he lacked it. Their children would listen with wide eyes, and when the story ended they would ask, "What happened to the hunters? What happened to the clan? What happened next?" And Wyatt and Griska would smile at each other, the look of two people who had walked through fire together and emerged stronger for it. "We lived," Griska would say simply. "We loved. We built a home and a family and a future we never imagined possible. That is what happened next." And if the children pressed for more details, more adventure, more drama, Wyatt would shake his head. "The real adventure is the life you build together. The daily choice to see each other, to choose each other, to stand together against whatever comes. That's the story that matters." On Wyatt's last day, decades after that fateful storm, he lay in the bed he'd shared with Griska for a lifetime, surrounded by children and grandchildren of mixed heritage. His body was failing, worn out by years of hard work and good living, but his mind was clear and his heart was full. Griska sat beside him, her hand in his, her green skin now lined and weathered but her eyes still the same brilliant yellow that had caught his attention in the firelight all those years ago. She was crying silently, and he squeezed her hand with what strength he had left. "Don't mourn," he whispered. "We had a good life, better than I ever deserved." "We had the life we built together," Griska corrected, her voice thick with tears, "and I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the parts where I was stubborn and difficult." "Especially those parts," she said, and managed a watery smile. "They made you who you are, the man I love." Wyatt looked around the room at the faces gathered there, children, grandchildren, friends both human and orc, all drawn together by the bonds they'd forged over years of shared life. This was his legacy, he realized. Not the farm or the settlement or any physical thing, but this web of connection and love that would continue long after he was gone. "Take care of her," he said to his eldest son, a strong young man with Wyatt's eyes and Griska's green skin. "Take care of each other. Keep building the world we started." "We will, Father," his son promised. "We will make you proud." "You already have," Wyatt said. His eyes were growing heavy, his breathing shallow. "All of you, you've given me more than I ever hoped for." Griska leaned down and kissed him, gentle and sweet, tasting of salt tears. "I will see you again," she whispered against his lips. "In whatever comes after, I will find you just as I found you before." "I'll be waiting," Wyatt promised, and with her hand in his and their family surrounding them, he let go of the world and slipped peacefully into whatever waited beyond. Griska lived another 10 years after Wyatt's death, guiding the settlement and watching it grow into a thriving town where humans and orcs lived in harmony. She never remarried, never sought another companion. When asked why, she would simply say that her heart belonged to Wyatt Voss, in this life and the next, and she was content to wait. On the anniversary of their wedding each year, she would walk to the grave where Wyatt rested beneath an oak tree they'd planted together in the early days of their marriage. She would sit beside the headstone and talk to him, telling him about their children's accomplishments, about the new families joining the settlement, about all the small victories and challenges that made up daily life. And sometimes, when the wind blew through the oak leaves just right, she swore she could hear his voice answering her, telling her he was proud, telling her he loved her, telling her to keep going just a little longer until they could be together again. When Griska's time finally came, she died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Wyatt had created. Her last words were a whisper of his name, and those who were there swore she was smiling. They buried her beside Wyatt beneath the oak tree, and on her headstone they carved the words that had brought them together. "Don't let them find me here." Below that, in smaller letters, "He never did. He kept her safe. He kept her loved. And together they changed the world." The settlement they had founded continued to thrive, a living testament to the power of love to overcome prejudice and fear. The story of Wyatt and Griska became legend, told and retold across generations, a reminder that the most profound changes often begin with a single act of kindness, a single choice to see past difference to the person beneath. And on quiet spring evenings, when the wind whispered through the oak tree where they rested side by side, people swore they could feel something in the air, a sense of peace and contentment, of 2 souls reunited and at rest, their work complete, and their love eternal. The orc woman who had crawled to a lonely farmer's porch covered in blood had found sanctuary, love, and a home that lasted beyond her lifetime. The human farmer who had chosen compassion over caution had found purpose, family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. Their story ended not with blood and fear, but with love and hope, with children and grandchildren who carried forward their vision of a world where differences were celebrated rather than feared, where bridges could be built between the most unlikely of peoples. And in the end, that was the greatest gift they gave to each other and to the world, proof that love, real and true and steadfast, could overcome anything. That 2 people from different worlds could build something beautiful together. That the choice to see each other, to choose each other, to stand together against the darkness, was always worth making. Their story lived on, inspiring others to take chances on unlikely love, to build bridges instead of walls, to choose hope over fear. And beneath the oak tree where they rested, the land itself seemed to remember them, blessed by the love they had shared and the life they had built together. It was a story that began with a desperate whisper in the night, "Don't let them find me here," and ended with a legacy of love that echoed through the ages, reminding everyone who heard it that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest act of kindness, and that true love knows no boundaries, respects no borders, and endures beyond even death itself.